Okay, so my name is Wilveria Sanders. I am the only and the youngest sister of Shelton Sanders. My brother Shelton went missing on June 19th, 2001. I have a passion for seeking justice for my brother. I'm very persistent into bringing closure to our family. My parents and my siblings, I have two other brothers. It's four of us in total. I have three brothers, including Shelton. So I have been on this road to finding my brother's remains. I have been on the road to bringing him home for a proper burial.
Shelton John Sanders was one of four siblings born to his parents, William and Peggy. As one of the oldest in the family, Shelton was a role model for his other siblings. Shelton grew up in an era where computer technology was evolving alongside him, and became enamored with computing early on. However, he was also involved in other hobbies. Regular childhood stuff, like being a member of the Boy Scouts and spending time outdoors. He loved animals and cooking, and played percussion in his high school's marching band. He graduated from Hillcrest High School in 1994, and later enrolled at the University of South Carolina, located in the city of Columbia, where he majored in Administrative Information Management. At work and school, Shelton became known as a computer guru who was as dependable and reliable as anyone he worked with. While taking classes at the University of South Carolina, he also worked as a computer systems manager at their School of Medicine, and planned to continue a career in computer programming after he finished his degree. With a 3.5 GPA, he stood a good chance of finishing his degree in the final half of 2001. The same year that Shelton turned 25 years old. At that time, Shelton still lived with his family in Rembert, South Carolina, making the lengthy 40-mile drive to work and school almost every day. Shelton was already making plans for his next steps after school, however, and planned to open up his own computer programming company, among other business ventures that he had in mind. Unfortunately, he would never get the chance.
He would give his shirt off his back for you. He was God-fearing, family-oriented. He loved Dallas Cowboys. He meant the world to his family and friends. He was a workaholic. He was engulfed in his studies. He was anxious to graduate in December of 2001 with a bachelor's in information and technology. He was a computer programmer. He had his own website, sandzone.com. So he has so many things going on for himself at that particular time. Humble, patient, helpful, funny, caring, generous, and he loved people. He was just the most outgoing person. He loved to grill food. He loved, watching the football, basketball games. So he was just an outgoing, everybody loved him, just a person that will help you in a time of need. So he's truly missed. Definitely missed.
This is the story of Shelton Sanders. June 19th, 2001. The final day of spring was the last day that Shelton Sanders was seen alive. That morning, as recounted by Shelton's family, started off like any other day for the aspirational 25-year-old.
On June 19th, so that morning of June 19th, Shelton was Shelton was living with us in Rembert, South Carolina, where we're from. He was commuting back and forth every day to Columbia from Rembert. On June 19th, Shelton's car was actually in the shop. My dad had it in the shop at Nissan, and Shelton had to borrow my other brother's car, which is his younger brother. So he borrowed his 1988 Oldsmobile, white Regency Oldsmobile. He left the house around 8:30 to 9 o'clock that morning, made his way to Columbia, went to class. He took one class. And then he went to work that afternoon, earlier part of the afternoon, got off work, maybe about one-ish maybe 1:30ish. The reason why I'm saying kind of giving an estimate is because we're just going based off of his last transactions. His last transaction was done around 1:52 at a bank on Forest Drive. He withdrew $40. Around 4 or 5ish, he made another transaction at a Piggly Wiggly on Rosewood Drive. So we do know that he arrived at one of his mutual friends' house around 7:30 or 8 o'clock. He had planned. His plan was to reserve bachelor party rooms, just reserving the rooms for a bachelor party for his friend that was scheduled for July the 7th. The wedding was held on July the 14th. Shelton was the best man. He was supposed to be the best man, but unfortunately he wasn't there for the wedding. So when he arrives at this mutual friend's house around 7:30 or 8, he was initially supposed to go with this gentleman to plan the bachelor party room, but his friend said that, he had a last minute change of plans. He had his girlfriend coming over and he wouldn't be able to go. Shortly after Shelton arrives there, Mark Richardson shows up. He's also friends with this other mutual friend as well. So he arrives maybe 8 o'clock. He stays for a few minutes, and Shelton is, saying, well, since the other friend couldn't go, he needed somebody to go with him. So Mark was already there, and he said that, well, he volunteered himself to Shelton and said, well, I'll ride with you to go book the hotel rooms. So the plan was to go to a few hotels, reserve them, and then get with a group of guys, because there were several guys that were several of Shelton friends that were all in a group since high school, and then they met at USC their freshman year. Shelton was supposed to, he took it upon himself to reserve the rooms, and then later on they were going to come to a consensus of which room that they were going to choose. So around, since they were both driving separate cars, Shelton was driving his car, Mark was driving his car. Shelton said, well, since Mark volunteered himself, he said, well, okay, well, I have to hurry up and take my brother's car back to Rembert, because he might need to use it. And so he said, we got to hurry up. And so Mark said, okay, well, you have to take me back home or I need to go back home to change out of my work clothes. And we can figure out who's going to ride with who. So they leave this mutual friend's house in separate cars. Shelton drives to Mark Richardson's house on Olympia Avenue. Shelton, while he's driving, Shelton makes a phone call to his brother. He actually calls our house to tell my parents he's going to be coming home late. He asked my parents, where is my other brother? My brother to let him know that he's going to be bringing his car home late. And that was around 8:40, 8:45-ish. So after Shelton arrives to Mark's house, he says, Mark is telling Shelton, I misplaced my phone. Can you call it? And then so Shelton calls his phone, and that's the last phone record we have on Shelton is at 9:07, where he calls, he makes his last phone call.
As you just heard, the last activity from Shelton's cell phone came at around 9 p.m. on the evening of June 19th. First, he called his family from Colombia, letting them know that he would be home in approximately 2 hours. And then, about 10 minutes after this, he used his cell phone to try and call Mark Richardson, the friend of a friend that had been acting as his bachelor party accomplice that evening. After making these 2 phone calls, Shelton and Mark would hit up at least 3 hotels in the Columbia area, hoping to find the right fit for their planned bachelor's party in a couple of weeks. However, towards the end of this escapade, things start to get a bit murky.
So around 9:30-ish, Shelton and Mark, it's not clear who rode with who. Mark, in some statements, Mark is saying that he rode with Shelton. In another statement, he's saying that Shelton rode with him in his Mitsubishi Galant. So it's really not clear who rode with who. But around 9:30, they arrive at Wesley Inns and Suites in Irmo. At 9:51, they arrive at Embassy Suites in Irmo as well. And then at between 10 and 10:45, they arrive at their last hotel is Residence Inn. So after they leave that hotel, we do have Shelton's statements on file that show that he actually was there. Law enforcement actually went to these hotels. They actually showed pictures of Mark and Shelton, and they did confirm that Shelton was there, and they provided the receipt with Shelton's credit card that he used. Based on Mark Richardson's statement, after they left all three of the hotel rooms, they went back to Mark's house. This is what Mark is saying, that he went back. They both went back to his residence around 11 or 11:30, and then Mark said that he asked Shelton, "Can you come inside and hang out for a little while?" And he said, "No, I need to go back home to give my brother his car back." And so he said that Shelton left his house, and that was the last time that he saw him, around 11 or 11:30.
After booking a room at the Residence Inn along Stone Ridge Drive, Shelton and Mark would drive back to Mark's home. There, Mark alleges, the two went their separate ways, and Shelton began making the 40-plus mile drive back home to his family's house in Rembert. Unfortunately, neither Shelton nor the vehicle he was driving would be seen again for quite some time. The following morning, June 20th, Shelton's mother received a phone call from Shelton's employer asking if she knew where he was, which she and the rest of their family were unable to do. The Sanders family would attempt to get in contact with Shelton, but were unable to track him down. Calls to his cell phone went straight to voicemail, indicating that the phone had either died or had been intentionally turned off. Since Shelton was known as a reliable and trusted communicator, someone that was close with his family and always kept them in the loop, lest they worry, this disappearing act became noteworthy. No one, not even investigators, believed that Shelton would have gone off the grid willingly. In the wake of Shelton Sanders' disappearance, police in Sumter County would keep an eye on Shelton's bank accounts and cell phone records for any sign of activity, but none of his accounts or his cards were touched after his disappearance, and his cell phone activity came to an end that same evening, with his final call being the one made at 9:07 p.m. to his friend Mark Richardson, who said that he had lost his own cell phone and asked Shelton to call it to help him locate it. Police would scour the area between Sumter and Richland counties, the stretch of road that Shelton had become intimately familiar with during his regular commutes. They were looking for not only Shelton but the vehicle he had been driving, his brother's 1988 Oldsmobile Regency. Police would search local highways, just in case Shelton had gotten into a car accident, and would even bring in a helicopter to scour the area from the sky. Authorities would even authorize a search of local waterways for any sign of Shelton, having been told by anonymous tipsters that his body had been dumped in some local rivers. Investigators would briefly look into the possibility that Shelton had been targeted because of his father, William, who had been a local magistrate that handled bond hearings at the Sumter County Correctional Center. But, just like their other leads, this proved to be an investigative dead end, and police would drop this theory days later. In the months to come, police were unable to find any evidence of wrongdoing, and Shelton's body was never found. A $20,000 reward raised by the Sanders family for information leading to the recovery of his remains went unfulfilled, and neither Shelton nor the items he had with him at the time, including a black Movado watch, would be seen again. For the first few days, Shelton's father, William, attempted to track down his son by reaching out to his friends. Knowing that Shelton had been hanging out with his friends on the night he disappeared, William would dispatch his two other sons, Shelton's brothers, to reach out to Shelton's friends and find out who had seen him last. During these first few days, it would be noted that almost all of Shelton's friends were cooperative and helpful, with one notable exception, Mark Richardson. Mark, the last person to have seen Shelton Sanders alive, seemed less than interested in helping Shelton's family track him down. During conversations with Shelton's family and other friends, Mark expressed the sentiment that he had never really liked Shelton to begin with, and wasn't close to him by any metric. On June 26th, days after Shelton's family had filed a missing persons report in Sumter County, where Shelton had last been seen. Mark abruptly changed course and agreed to speak with the Sanders family. During this conversation, Mark explained away his own bizarre actions and said that Shelton had dropped him off at his own house sometime between 11 and 11:30 p.m. on June 19th. A police officer that was present during this conversation later recalled that Mark acted nervous and defensive throughout and kept asking if he was a suspect.
I'll say when my dad made the initial missing person report in June of 2001, it was June 22nd. It started in Sumter County. It didn't start in Richland County where my brother went missing. My dad and my parents were under the impression that Shelton was already on the way home. So we thought that Shelton went missing in Sumter. So therefore the missing persons report was done in Sumter, right? So Sumter County started interviewing. Well, actually my dad started. He instructed my brother to call all of Mark and Shelton's friends. Or actually Shelton's friends, but at the time my dad didn't know who was last seen with Shelton. So they informed my brother and my dad that Mark was the last person seen with him. Mark's behavior was very shady, starting in late 1999 to early 2000 when he started working for an oil drill company. He was acting paranoia, just paranoid about everything, about everyone, always hearing voices in his head about killing his friends. He said he kept telling his friends that I need to kill y'all because I'm hearing voices in my head. I can hear y'all talking about me, even when they weren't talking about him. So they said that he would act as if he was on crack at times, or he was, just out of this world. So his behavior was kind of fishy. I know that when he called my brother and my dad reached out to him on June 25th. He cursed my dad out. My dad was just asking him, saying, hey, we just got word that you were the last person seen with Shelton on June 19th. We just want to ask you a few questions, and we would just appreciate if you can just, let us know what happened. And he told my dad, I don't have to tell you a goddamn thing. You're a goddamn judge. I don't have to tell you a effing thing about, Shelton. Figure it out yourself for what happened to him. So that was that particular evening on June 25th. The next day, my dad reached out to him again because of his behavior on the phone. My dad reached out to law enforcement and asked law enforcement if they can assist him on the next day, saying that, well, I'm going to call Mark and, see if I can get any, yesterday didn't work out. He wanted to curse. So, he tried again. And that particular evening, he changed his personality. His personality was Mr. Sanders. Yes, I can come over to your house and try to help you find Shelton. So, that was June 26th. One day he was cursing my dad out. The next day he was coming over to our house and addressing my dad as Mr. Sanders and my mom as Mrs. Sanders. So, he recalled all the events that took place that night, and he just said he doesn't know. He said Shelton told him he was coming home after he left his house. So Mark's behavior was very fishy. He gave his statement to the police. His Sumter County took his statement, his sister and brother's statement. The people that heard the gunshots that were next door neighbors, they took their statements. And after that, the case kind of went cold for 2 years until the car was found in April 26, 2003.
That's after the break. Today's episode is brought to you by Magic Spoon. Growing up, cereal was one of the best parts of being a kid, but I had to give it up because I realized it was full of sugar and other junk that you really should not eat. Thankfully, I recently discovered Magic Spoon, and it has already replaced my other breakfast options. Magic Spoon contains 0 grams of sugar, 13 to 14 grams of protein, and only 4 net grams of carbs in each serving. Each serving is only 140 calories, and it's not only low carb and keto friendly, but gluten, grain, soy, and GMO free. Each variety pack contains 4 flavors: cocoa, fruity, frosted, and peanut butter. And while I do enjoy each, I personally love mixing the cocoa with the peanut butter. That chocolate peanut butter combo is the bee's knees. the cat's pajamas, whatever you want to call it. To try this out today, go to magicspoon.com/unresolved to grab a variety pack. Make sure to use our promo code UNRESOLVED at checkout to save $5 off of your order. Magic Spoon is so confident in their product that each purchase is backed with a 100% happiness guarantee. So if you don't like their cereal for any reason, I don't know why you wouldn't, but they'll refund your money, no questions asked. Remember to get your next delicious bowl of guilt-free cereal at magicspoon.com/unresolved. And don't forget to use the offer code UNRESOLVED to save $5 off of your order at checkout. Today's episode is also brought to you by BetterHelp. Is there something that interferes with your happiness or is preventing you from achieving your goals? If so, BetterHelp Online Counseling is here for you. Connect with your professional counselor in a safe and private online environment. It's so convenient, and you can now get help on your own time and at your own pace. You can schedule secure video or phone sessions plus chat and text with your therapist. Unresolved listeners get 10% off of their first month with the discount code UNRESOLVED. If you would like to get started today, head to betterhelp.com/unresolved. Fill out the introduction questionnaire and let BetterHelp assess your needs to match you up with a counselor you will love. Once again, you can claim that offer by heading to betterhelp.com/unresolved. And don't forget to use the discount code UNRESOLVED. Now, let's return to the show. On April 26, 2003, nearly 2 years after Shelton's disappearance, a noise disturbance would be called into the Sumter County Sheriff's Office. This disturbance was reported at the Greenbrier Apartments, located off of Park Lane Road in Columbia, near the Columbia Place Mall, and just a few miles away from where Shelton Sanders had last been seen. There, between buildings 18 and 20 of the apartment building, officials with the sheriff's office would discover the Oldsmobile Regency that had disappeared with Shelton nearly 2 years prior. This vehicle had been backed into a parking spot facing the apartment building, and police later stated that the vehicle had been there for some time, at least 2 months, but likely closer to 2 years. The tires were flat, the gas and oil were almost completely empty, and a decent amount of black fluid had leaked out of the vehicle and dried up on the pavement below. Unfortunately, no evidence could be recovered from the vehicle. No fingerprints, no DNA evidence, etc. Other potential evidence may have been compromised by police at the scene, with some newspaper reports detailing that the door handles had been touched by investigators before they dusted for prints, and that the large oil stain under the vehicle was not promptly tested. Despite this vehicle being discovered in Sumter County, the vehicle would be handed over as evidence to the Richland County Sheriff's Office, who had taken over the missing persons case in the interim months, and news of this discovery would be withheld from the public for upwards of 2 years. Mark Anthony Richardson, the last known person to have seen Shelton Sanders alive, would remain investigators' top suspect in this case, who believed that he had shot Shelton to death and then covered up the crime afterward. Mark had been a loose friend of Shelton's and had been with him during his final known hours. If you recall, Mark had told investigators that Shelton had dropped him off at his home along Columbia's Olympia Avenue sometime between 11 and 11:30 p.m. on June 19, 2001. However, Mark's cell phone records indicated that he had attempted to make several phone calls less than 2 hours later, needing another ride home from a separate area of town, an area close to where Shelton's vehicle was found nearly 2 years later.
Mark Richardson said that after Shelton left, he said that he went inside his house, packed his laundry, took his laundry to the nearest laundromat on Olympia Avenue. It was around 12, he said, 12 midnight. When he got to the laundromat, he said that he met up with a prostitute named Rita Green. And he said that he knew this girl for several years. And he asked her, for sexual relations. And she said, yeah. And he asked her, can you drop me off back to my house so I can ride with you? So he says that the prostitute Rita Green dropped him off at his laundry off in his car, and he got into the car with her. He said that she's driving a 4-door white car, And he said that whenever they got onto the road, on Two Notch I-77, they got into an argument. He said the wrong thing to her, and then she put him out of the car, and he ended up walking on Two Notch Road, calling his brother and his sister at 12:49, and then again at 12:58, asking his sister to pick him up. She says, "No, I'm already in bed." And then he calls his brother. His brother says, "Okay, I'll pick you up." Now this is at 12:58 a.m. on June 20th, approximately 2 hours after Shelton. He claims that Shelton left his house at 11 or 11:30. But later on, a few days later, after law enforcement gets involved, you'll notice, or you're probably aware that there were 3 gunshots that were heard at Mark Richardson's residence by his neighbors between 11 and 11:30, which is also the same time that Mark was saying that they arrived back at his house after planning the bachelor party rooms or reserving the rooms. So the neighbor said that they came outside around 11 or 11:30, and they asked Mark, what was that noise? They said they heard 3 gunshots, pow, pow, pow. And the gentleman came outside and approached Mark and said, it was dark outside, but he said he couldn't see him over the bushes. He said that the house that they're next door neighbors, but Mark's house sat behind their house, so he couldn't really see over the bushes. And he just said, "Is everything all right?" And Mark said, "Everything is fine. That was just my car backfiring." So that's the timeline for that particular night leading into June 20th in the morning. And those are Mark Richardson's statements that took place on after that particular day.
Despite Mark being the last person to see Shelton alive, and having a host of circumstantial evidence alluding towards his involvement in or knowledge of Shelton's disappearance, investigators would have a hard time uncovering any direct evidence that pointed towards Mark's guilt.
Well, actually, when they did the search warrant back in 2001 at Mark's house, they found I want to say a 38 revolver, or he tried to sell a 38 revolver.
Yeah.
They found a 45 caliber in his house. So that made them look suspicious as well. Like, why are you trying to sell your gun 4 days after Shelton goes missing? And they did confiscate a knife, a 45 caliber gun, and other auxiliaries in his house in 2001. So after the car was found in 2003, after a noise disturbance complaint was called in, they dispatched the car, and then they located the tag number, connected the tag number to the missing persons report. That's when the case was transferred over to Richland County. So when Richland County Sheriff's Department got a hold of the case, they re-interviewed the witnesses who weren't interviewed back in 2001. And Mark Richardson was one of those witnesses, again, that they brought in for questioning. On July the 26th, 2003, Mark Richardson asked the law enforcement officer, is there such thing as an accidental death in South Carolina? And then, they say, well, yeah, we can explain that. Mr. and Mrs. Sanders just want to bring this case to a close. And he said, how can I explain getting rid of a body? And then the law enforcement officer said it just needs to be explained, and that the answer lies within him. And he just he responded as if he was frustrated, and he said that he can't. He's already been to Shelton's people's house and acted as if he wanted to help them find him. And he put his palm with his hands in his face and just was like, he doesn't want to say. After that, another law enforcement officer walks in to the room, into the interrogation room, and he just stops talking. He just as if he never said anything, he just stopped talking. So, after that, in 2003, law enforcement did more, I guess, in 2004, beginning of 2005, they still were trying to collect more evidence. Like I said, he made the phone calls from the towers, from the Two Notch Road Tower, which is one block away from where my brother's car was found in 2003. And so, like I said, he gave that alibi about the prostitute, because they're asking him, why is your phone pinging off of this tower? Shelton's car was found here, which is, in walking distance to where, your phone is pinging for your sister and brother to pick you up from. And they did another search warrant and arrest warrant back in 2005, in October 2005. They confiscated his computers, laptops, and they found missing persons, abduction books on him. He had that in his house. He was also researching Shelton's information on his computer, and he admitted that he was trying to keep up with the ongoing investigation of Shelton because he wanted to see what the latest was on Shelton's investigation. So during that search warrant, they confiscated things out of his house. They also did swabs of DNA, and they did the luminol forensics on his house at the Olympia Avenue residence. So there was a lot of things that took place years after the incident. So like I said, there was no DNA found. You probably read that there was no DNA found in the car, no forensics anywhere.
In October of 2005, more than 4 years after Shelton's disappearance, 30-year-old Mark Richardson was arrested and charged with the murder of Shelton Sanders. While his trial wouldn't begin until 2008, prosecutors, having to try the case without Shelton's body, tried to paint a convincing argument centered around Mark's deteriorating mental health and his sketchy behavior at the time of Shelton's disappearance. You may recall that Mark had reportedly started to show signs of untreated mental illness between 1999 and 2000, having told friends that he was hearing voices, which were reportedly encouraging him to do violent things to others. Acquaintances of Mark's, including some of his friends and family, described him as a paranoid and strange individual during this period, whose behavior had started to grow rather scary. Prosecutors would also present the witness statements from Mark's neighbors, who recalled hearing 3 gunshots in his home on June 19, 2001, the timing of which correlated to when Shelton had dropped off Mark at his home, according to statements from Mark himself. One of these neighbors, who came over to Mark's house minutes later to check in on him, was told by Mark that the sound had been his car backfiring in the garage. A search of Mark's home by police in 2001 had uncovered a Glock 45 caliber pistol, and it was reported by some of Mark's friends that in the days after Shelton's death, he had attempted to sell a separate 38 caliber revolver, which he reportedly told friends he didn't need anymore. However, without a body, the recovery of these weapons would prove to be virtually useless, since they couldn't be compared or contrasted to anything else. Cell phone records also indicated that Mark had been near the location that Shelton's vehicle was abandoned, the Greenbrier Apartments, approximately 2 hours after saying goodbye to Shelton, while trying to rouse his siblings for a ride home. Mark's cell phone had pinged off of cellular tower number 147, which was incredibly close to the apartment complex along Park Lane Road that Shelton's vehicle was found at in April of 2003. Prosecutors also presented Mark's half-confession to police from 2005, during which he had asked, as recounted by Richland County Sheriff Sergeant Walter McDaniels, "How do I explain getting rid of a body?" Mark's confession, which he had backtracked on almost immediately, seemed to point to a situation where he expressed remorse for accidentally killing Shelton. However, without him fully confessing, this was just a guess on behalf of authorities, trying to figure out why he might have wanted to kill Shelton Sanders. The defense, on the other hand, provided a much less exhaustive case of their own, instead arguing that there was enough doubt in this case to acquit Mark Richardson. Their argument boiled down to the belief that without a body, it was impossible to prove that a crime had taken place at all, and that Shelton Sanders was still technically just a missing person.
Exactly, and that's exactly what his defense lawyer was trying to say. It was a nobody case, like a saying sort of like that, as if my brother ran away. But when you see his cell phone records and his frequent calls back and forth to home to let us know he made it to work, he's on the way home, he was looking forward to all these things that he had planned to do. who, just vanishes without a trace like that? There has to be something. But unfortunately, the time, didn't play in our favor. So much time had passed. It's just unfortunate, 7 years later. We have a suspect. Almost we have a confession. But like I said, it's always a hurdle that we're trying to cross to get that information out of him. You definitely have the friends that are saying that, he heard voices in his head. He's always accusing them of following him or being jealous of him. He was making all kinds of comments to his friends, and all of these guys were friends since 1993. So they said for him to suddenly change, even his parents said that he had behavior issues. His mom kicked him out of the house back then, and between 1999 and 2000, she said that she didn't recognize her son anymore, that he wasn't welcome in her house. His dad even came and gave a statement stating that, he himself suffered the same issue that Mark Richardson was suffering from, when he was Mark Richardson's age. So apparently it could have been some type of family medical issue that he was never seen by a psychiatrist or a psychologist. So his dad said that it was some type of phase that his son was going through.
Mark Richardson's trial concluded in April of 2008, nearly 7 years after Shelton's initial disappearance. Because of the successful arguments of his lawyers, the jury would remain deadlocked, and after being unable to come to a unanimous decision, a mistrial would be declared. Mark Richardson may be tried again in the future for these crimes, if new evidence were to be uncovered in this case. Sadly, not a lot has been written about Shelton's case over the past 20 years. While his story had not attracted a lot of attention early on, only one South Carolina newspaper covered it for the first few years. That attention seemed to virtually disappear entirely after Mark Richardson's case resulted in a hung jury. It wasn't until 2018 that Shelton's younger sister began to finally breathe new life into the story. Wilveria was only 11 years old at the time of Shelton's disappearance, but continues to adore him a lifetime later. She continues to search for her big brother, and is determined to either find him or to find out what happened to him.
I am 30 years old. I miss my brother tremendously. I was only 11 years old at the time he went missing, and now I'm 30, getting ready to turn 31, so it's been 20 years. I have many memories of my brother. He taught me how to cook. He taught me how to clean. He even taught me how to box. He was my disciplinary every time I got in trouble at school, or if I wasn't reading a book on Saturdays, he's spanking me, or, telling me, patting me on, tapping me on my hands, telling me, no, you don't do that. So I was, mischievous. So he was getting on me about that. He walked me down the aisle on my baptism in November of 2000 at our church. He was making sure that he called me Ailsa Sanders, actually. He wanted me to know that when I'm in trouble, my name is Ailsa Sanders, which is my middle name, Ailsa. So he was just, an inspiration to me, the most wonderful person in my life. He inspired me. He was my role model. He was a father figure, not just a brother. He gave me lots of hugs and kisses. He always told me he loved me. And so with that, I've lost someone dear to me, my best friend, my brother, just the love of my life. And I am on a mission to finding him and bringing justice for our family, our Sanders family.
Wolveria has been making the rounds between investigators, attorneys, government officials, journalists, and anyone with an interest in this case in order to raise awareness for her brother's story. Not only has she been successful in raising the profile of this case in the media, but she has had several billboards with Shelton's picture and the reward put up throughout South Carolina. Wolveria insists that she and her family aren't in this for vengeance. They're even willing to settle for something less than justice, as long as it leads to the return of Shelton's body. She and her loved ones just want to be able to put Shelton to rest after 20 years, which would allow them to finally begin properly mourning his loss.
Like I said, I've been on this since 2018. I've been in contact with the Sheriff's Department in Richland County, the Attorney General of South Carolina. I've been in contact with Shelton's friends, just trying to, get the outlet out there, contacting the news, being aired in the Midlands and the upstate area. I also have, been in touch with 48 Hours CBS. I've contacted numerous of crime shows, but, right now, the family is offering a $25,000 reward, cash reward for any persons. It doesn't matter who you are. For if you have any information on the location of the remains of Shelton, and it leads to this discovery of Shelton's remains, we will offer. We're going to increase it very soon. But right now it stands at $25,000. They can report anonymously if they want to be anonymous. If you want to come forth and say who you are, that's fine as well. It can be confidential. The phone number to report these tips is 803-427-4209, or you can send an email at findingsheltonsanders@gmail.com. That's findingsheltonsanders, all one word, @gmail.com. We have, done a lot. We've used private investigators, psychics, just kept brainstorming any kind of ways to get a confession. We're willing to forgive whoever the people that have been involved, if it's more than Mark Richardson or anybody who had accessory after the fact, if he had any help. We're asking Mark Richardson or anyone who's been in contact with him or who knows him or who have had conversations with him and he's confessed to them to please come forward. Anybody that knows any information. We have billboards in Greenville, Columbia. The suspect, Mark Richardson, now lives in Greenville. We've had yard signs, flyers, billboards in his area. In Columbia, where Shelton went missing, they're up right now in the city and in the county. It's in our hometown in Sumter, just in case if people have relocated, and there are going to be more surrounding in the cities of South Carolina. Shelton will be featured on the radio as an advertisement to give this same information out. And so I'm trying to expand it nationally. Please spread the word everywhere that there is a cash reward, and we're just praying for closure, just to put Shelton in a proper burial spot. It's one thing to lose a person, but it's another thing to not know where your missing loved one is. So it's almost a double stab. The person was murdered, and you've lost a loved one. But then it's another thing when you've lost a loved one, but then you don't know where they are or what happened to them. So just if someone can please provide closure to our family and let us know where Shelton's remains are or what happened to him, we would greatly appreciate it.
As of this episode's recording, the story of Shelton Sanders remains unresolved.